If needlework is your passion, whether you're stitching by hand, machine, or mixing it all up, you're going to want to hear about the Mr. X Stitch Contemporary Needlework Prize 2025. This prize celebrates the best in modern stitch, and it's open to creatives from all around the world, whether you're a student or an emerging artist or a seasoned professional. And the best part, you don't have to send your work anywhere. Just upload high-resolution images to a private folder we will send you after you enter. You can enter more than one category, for instance, hand embroidery and 3D textiles. Just grab an entry for each one. And if you've got a student ID, you can get 50% off the entry price as well. The deadline for entering is 30th of June 2025, and entries are now open at xstitchmag.com/prize-entry. Thanks to our brilliant sponsors, Bookmarked Hub by Search Press and David and Charles, and the legends at Lowry Workstands. If you've got the stitch bug, this is your time. Show us what you've got. Enter the prize now. Visit xstitchmag.com/prize-entry to get your ticket today. Orly Cogan is a New York-based textile artist whose hand-embroidered fictions on vintage fabrics have been popular since she started making them back in the 1990s. I've known Orly for over a decade and have been a fan of her work from the very start, and so we have a great needle exchange. And in this first part of the conversation we talk about how she came to find needlework, the importance of sketchbooks and how to keep your inspiration in a way that is meaningful to you but also might leave an important legacy. And actually, we come up with one of possibly the greatest parenting tricks I've ever discovered in my life. So if you've got children of a certain age who are desperate to get their hold of things, you need to listen to this episode and see whether the trick that Orly tried would work with your family. I'm going to try it, I tell you. Orly's great. Orly's work is amazing if you've not seen her. I mean, a lot of you hopefully will be aware who she is. Her work is provocative, it is wistful, it's just great, and it's really lovely to talk to her after such a long time of kind of knowing her electronically. So I hope you enjoy this show. Obviously we'll be back next week with the second part of the conversation. And if you have enjoyed the show, if you're a fan of Orly's work, or if you know anybody who is a fan of Orly Cogan, please point them in the direction of this podcast so that they can find out a bit more about her as well. That'll do for now. I hope you have a lovely week. We'll see you next week with the second part of this Needle Exchange. But in the meantime, enjoy the show. I was going to open with a really big question. Is that okay? Because the thing that interests me, and I said this in an email to you, is that you expressed an amount of nervousness about talking to me on a podcast, and yet I have seen embroidered images of you completely naked, and you don't seem to be bothered by that. Can you explain that dichotomy for me?
Yes, and I believe I answered it in only one quick little line, even in our email exchange, right?
Maybe.
Did I?
Well, what was it?
Well, I don't remember what I said, but I can say something now. When I'm depicting myself or a version of myself, which it usually is a version of myself, some me playing a part, like an actress in a play. It's not a photograph, so it's not specifically me in a graphic way. It's me taking on a role in a story, and so it's a piece of me, but it's detached from the actual person. So that's why I can play many roles within my work. But when I'm talking on a podcast, once it's out there, it can be re-recorded and listened to forever. And so the nervous part of me says, whatever I might say casually in conversation, where I'm not typing out or editing it, you open yourself to much more vulnerability than you do with say, making an artwork where you completely control everything, make it exactly how you wish, and then put it out to the public. This is very sort of off the cuff, conversation, recording, it's out there. There's a lot less control involved.
That's interesting. Because I was thinking, I mean, there is a bit of that, and I guess with the needlework, it's fixed, isn't it? Once it's made, and unless somebody physically changes it, it stays the same. So it's not as easy
Right.
to edit.
And also, it's open to interpretation, where just having a conversation, it's much more cut and dry.
Do you think that the images of yourself that you create in needlework, they're kind of like fictions? So they're like Orly, not Orly kind of thing?
That's right. Sorry, not sorry.
Yeah, that's interesting. Because that's what a lot of your work's about, isn't it?
Well, it's telling a story. They're narratives, but they're implied narratives. It's not a concrete story. I speak through symbolism, and so something that I think is symbolic in saying something might not read that way to another viewer. So I actually love what I love most is hearing what other people think of my work rather than me talking about it. I'm actually more interested in hearing what other people see in it because it informs me.
Yeah. Because it's not like there's ever just the one thing going on in your work, is it? There's always like loads of different layers.
Yeah, yeah, and the layering is part of what I love about the medium. Actually, when I first started doing embroidery, it was very densely embroidered, small figures, and then I kind of realized, oh, with this medium, I can work more like drawing, like line. I don't have to work more like painting, because I was trained as a painter, and so that kind of revelation opened up a lot more texture for me, where I could do something very dense, or I could do something very light and overlapping, and just so much variety in the stitch line.
Yeah, interesting. And then with your pieces, do you have a story in your head that you're telling about that piece? So you can go, right, I've ticked all those boxes with my composition and the symbols you wanted to put out there.
Sometimes I have a story that I have in mind, or concepts, or I hear something that I want to say visually, and then other times I'm inspired by the actual fabric, and something is born out of the existing patterns I'm playing off of.
And do you know when you're finished with a piece?
Yes. um, Sometimes I think I'm finished, or I know I'm not finished, and I just live with it for a while, hang it up for a while, and do something else, and then go back into it. Or even, I mean, there are pieces I've left for years, and then pull them out and go back into, because I'm going through a different phase. Like, say I go through what I would call a more minimal phase, where I do a one figure in the center, and I feel like that's enough. And then I'll go through a maximalist phase, and I'll pull that one figure piece and say I need to add 10 more images on top of her, or and it changes the piece entirely. But my father always says, leave it as it is. He likes the more like iconic kind of one or two figures, where there are other ones that are really very layered, many figures and animals, and different things going on, that can be busy. It's a different sensibility.
So are those pieces that, like, you might say, for instance, you might in 2012 go, yeah, I finished that piece. And then in 2015, you'll sort of look at it and go, I don't think I've finished that piece.
Well, it was finished for the time, at the time when it was created. And then and then I'll look back at it sometimes, and either it's fully resolved in my mind years later, and I leave it alone, or I feel like, oh, this piece is great, but it has potential to be more interesting, or more dynamic, or more complicated, or it's almost like a person, right? You're evolving, and you're working on yourself. So sort of the way you handle something at one point in life, if you come across a similar situation. As you evolve, you might react differently. It's almost it's almost like that. Like I look at something and I think it needs a bit more.
That's interesting though, because I think for a lot of people, they finish a piece of work and they don't necessarily look back. So I kind of think it's interesting that you're constantly reflecting back on things.
Well, not constant. I mean, it's not it's not something I do regularly. It's something I've done before, but
Right.
not as a constant.
Do you find that there are some pieces where you just have that little nagging thing where you're just like, might come back to you?
I have a lot of unfinished work that I have sort of in a pile labeled unfinished work that I know I'll come back to. So it's kind of like that. Like I'll go through that pile and see what they need.
And are you quite at ease with that? Are you quite easy going, I'm done with that for the moment?
I'm at ease when I don't think of like suddenly dying and then all this unfinished work. What are we gonna do with this? You know, what's gonna come of the pieces that had great potential because you know they were, I don't know, hundreds of hours put into certain ones, but they're not resolved yet. You know, I don't know. That will be left to whatever happens after. But sometimes I feel like, God, I got to just finish all this unfinished work. So if I die suddenly, at least it will be a complete portfolio, all done, ready to show for anyone who could continue in showing my legacy.
There'll never be like that, because you get that with authors, don't you? And then someone comes along and finishes the book and they'll just look at it and be like, yeah, that last Orly Cogan piece was quite different, the second half of it.
Well, that's like you'll go to a museum show and someone like opens up a sketchbook of an artist and frames them all up. And I think, you know, the dead artist thinking, oh, I just did those personally for me. They were 5-minute sketches. I didn't want them to be framed on a museum wall. It wasn't ready.
Yeah. That's it, isn't it? You never want to leave notes going, oh, I fucking hate something so and such or whatever, in case they become exalted parts of a history somewhere down the line.
It's true. When I was little, I went through a very short phase where I wrote a diary, mostly like eventing kind of little journal, but pretty much that day or the next day I'd have to destroy and throw it away because I would think, you know, oh, somebody saw this. If my parents saw this, they would get the wrong impression. And if something happened to them or something happened to me and they should read this, it was just in a moment. And, you know, I even as a little kid, I had that kind of, I don't know, fatalistic idea that I wouldn't want to suddenly vanish and people find remnants of that I couldn't explain. That
it's very kind of you to think that way, isn't it? Do you sort of tidy up after yourself on a regular basis, just in case I pop my clogs?
I care less about that, like tidying up and stuff like that. I do try to here and there, but that's less important to me than like, you know, than leaving notes or unfinished work or something like that.
Do you have a lot of sort of notebooks, sketchbooks? Do you write down your process? Like, do you have like liner notes for your work as you're going along or anything like that?
I used to think of ideas and concepts and write down like a few lines of concepts I had to figure out how to describe visually, which can be tricky. But now not so much because I work a little bit more intuitively now. And I take pictures now that we have the iPhones and it's so easy to take pictures. A lot of times if I'm walking around, I'll take pictures as inspiration. Half the time I don't look at them again after that. But somehow it registers.
It goes in the unconscious there somewhere, doesn't it? And then pops out later.
I often will come across them again when I'm trying to clear out my phone and make more space for storage while I'm deleting. Then I'll be like, oh yeah, I took all those pictures that, you know, in that store window or something in the city that I meant to go back into that I was inspired by. And I'll come across them when I'm just clearing out.
I kind of think that's one of the problems with the digital age, isn't it? It's like even the other day I was out walking the dog and there was some blossom that was out and I was like, oh, that looks really nice. And so I took a close up of it. I'll never look at that again. Whereas if I'd have had to, like, even if it was a Polaroid or something more physical, you know, if we had to go and print them out and then you've got these physical objects lying around, there's much greater chance of you actually doing something with them.
It's true. Actually, I have a story when my daughter was real little. Um, my story relates to what you were saying.
Mm-hmm.
When my daughter was real little, you know, we'd walk around and she'd see all these wonderful things in store windows, and I was thinking, I can't buy. I'm like going to go broke buying whatever little tchotchkes she liked in the store window for little kids. It's so enticing. You walk in, you look around, and I was always trying to say, we're just looking. You know, we can appreciate it, not own it. You know, we're just looking. um, and then I think she got the idea. She was like, Mommy, can I have your phone? And she's like, I'm just going to take a picture of it. And she started just taking pictures of things she liked or kind of wanted. But it would completely satisfy her desire to want me to buy it. It stopped that completely. And it was such a it was such a great mechanism that she figured out. Like, okay, I can take a picture of it. Now I captured a bit of it and I'm done. And I could actually even delete it like that very same day. She would never need to look at it. She would never ask me to look at the pictures she had taken that day of the various toys or that we saw in the windows or in the stores. And that would satiate that desire.
God, I'm just
Like,
thinking you might have cracked something there, Orly.
yeah,
Imagine if
yeah.
suddenly I'm going to take my children to TK Maxx. That's what we call it. You call it TJ Maxx, I believe, where they
Mhm.
always run around and want to buy dolls off of the shops. And we're like, we just go in knowing we're going to have an argument. But if I give them a camera and they take a photo of it, I might try
You're
that.
like, just take a picture of it, you know, and you could say, you know, see if you like it so much that you look at it, you know, over and over, and if you still want it, like, well, it's so the desire to want something, it's so impulsive,
Mm.
and once you're away from that space, you don't really need it anymore, or want it, or think about it. So in her somehow in her 5-year-old brain, she figured out, or maybe it just was intuitive. I'll take a picture, I'll own a piece of it, but then after she took that picture, it was never thought about it again, didn't need it, didn't talk about it. It was finished. It was great because I saved a lot of money probably.
Yeah, right. I think I feel like this is a story we need to promote to the world now. I think we might have just cracked the child in a shop scenario or something. I'm going to
I
give
don't think
my children pictures of candy and see whether that shuts them up.
oh yeah, it's a good dieting tool for when you get older. Actually, that makes it worse though, because then, you know, it's a very certain age. It's a young age. I think it probably ended at 5 or maybe even 4.5. Because then you look at pictures, and this is a problem with social media. Then it becomes the opposite as we age. And the more things we look at, the more we want it, or the more we want to be like it, or the more we have grass is greener syndrome. You know,
Mm.
so that technique really only happens, and I think when you're maybe a toddler, and then it completely does a 180, doesn't it?
Yeah, there's definitely a certain. I know that I'm, excuse me, in quite a sweet spot at the moment with the kids because of their ages at 6 and 4, and you know they
Mm.
think I'm like cool and nice and stuff, and I know that there's a really rough period that's going to come along. I was trying to think when you first appeared on my website, but I'm going to go out because actually you were in my book. Hang on.
Hmm.
Where's my book?
The one with the arrow on the cover.
On a good day, I'd have my book close to hand. But I mean, the Push Stitchery came out in like 2011, I think. So, I mean, it must have been like 2010 maybe when I first came across your work. And at that time, you were just becoming a mum. Does that sound
Yes,
about right?
he was born in 2009. And my first solo show was back in 2000. So I've been doing fiber based work since the 90s. Since I was like so early, probably the late 90s is when I transitioned sort of between painting and drawing to almost strictly threads and fabrics and things like that back in the late 90s. Long
Can
time
you
ago.
remember what prompted that change?
Yes. There's some background. My
Mm-hmm.
mother collected old quilts and those old embroideries, uh, they're called samplers. You
Yeah.
know, those little pieces that people frame a lot of time, that where girls would practice their alphabets and cross stitch
Mm-hmm.
and that. So she had a bunch of those framed, and always really appreciated the little sayings on them, and the work. And so she was very interested in folk art, and particularly in like textiles and things like that. So I have that in my, just to have that, to know that that's uh, what I grew up around, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
that. Um, and then my father was very interested in painting, like Rubens and Botticelli, like lots of figures, interactions, that like gods and goddesses, that kind of
Mm.
work. And uh, art in my house was a really important thing. Um, but back to the pointed question: how did that start, the working with like fiber materials? It was it was something I was always comfortable doing, because I went to this little private school where you learn to knit almost before you learn to write, and um, so I was just comfortable using my hands, working with materials, knitting, crocheting, beeswax candles, all the uh, warm and fuzzy materials, uh, like from the almost like from the old days,
Mm.
that you wouldn't necessarily learn in a different kind of school. So my mom was going to take I think it was like a 1-day workshop at the Folk Art Museum here in New York City, and she couldn't make it. And she called me and said, "We've already paid for it. It's a 1-day thing. It's quilt squares, something to do with quilting squares. Why don't you just take it if you're free today?" And I think it was, I can't remember if I was, yeah, I guess it was somewhere in the mid 90s or late 90s, something like that. And I said, yeah, yeah, I'll definitely take it. That sounds fun. And I took the class, and it was me and a bunch of elderly women. And we just were hand making the quilt squares, which I felt quite comfortable doing. And I just I embroidered in the seams of some of my square, a couple figures like odalisques lying down, which is just natural to me, because been doing figurative work for a long time, and that's the kind of work I looked at like in the museums and stuff, or traditional paintings. And they went crazy for it. They went crazy for uh, seeing like a nude figure on the
Mm.
quilt square. And I liked the reaction, and then I kind of continued, doing that, more and more of that. And then um, a friend of mine who was also a curator came to the studio to do a studio visit a bit after that, and he saw, looking at the paintings, and then he was also saw this like pile of fabric, and he said, "What's there? What's going on there?" And I said, "Oh, it's just something I'm kind of playing around with. I don't know." I never pictured um, textiles or fabric or string or any of these materials being on like a white gallery wall. I always felt like it had to be one of the painting or drawing,
Mm.
something that I in the white box. I didn't really think of what I was doing as something that I could market. But again, we're talking about like 30 years ago. So, and I had gone to art school and studied painting, so I was very
Mm.
much in that headspace. So I was kind of doing these embroidered figures for I don't know, myself, like, because I enjoyed them, and it was something completely different where I could draw with thread. And the curator said, "This, do more of this. This is really interesting. This is really fascinating. I've never seen anything like this." Um, and and he just kind of almost gave me, I don't want to say permission, but he opened up
Mm.
this idea, like, wow. someone in the art, capital A art world would consider this as high art. Um, Kind of saying that in quotes, because there's the
Mm.
whole with craft and fine art and all that. Um, so I continued on with that.
Yeah, because that's the thing, isn't it? It's like you've gone to this workshop. It's a folk art workshop. Let's just say
Yes.
folk art, isn't it? It's not real art. It's folk art. And
Right.
suppose, yeah, you're just, and that's probably quite funny. Did you have a point where you're doing the painting with your fine art brain, and then you're just sitting down and doing some stitching with your folk art brain, or you know? I think what you said as well. It's quite true. That guy probably just validated your
Yeah.
meanderings and said, you can do this. You can be open about it. You don't just have to stick them on a pile in the corner.
Right. You don't have to be, just like you can use any material. Like it opened up like it could have been anything. I mean, I wouldn't have even thought that you could make sculpture with a pile of like cardboard, and that's done all the time now. And at the time, I guess just right after art school, I was very much thinking in a very traditional kind of way, like, I am painting, and that's what shows.
Mm,
So
mm.
I took
And
it a bit of culture.
yeah, and I wanted to dial back slightly because you studied in Florence.
Hmm.
I
For
like Florence a lot.
Oh, I love Italy. I studied in Florence, and and you can probably see the influence of, I think you can, right, of the figures. Like I have this sort of um, symmetry, implied symmetry, not exact, you know, triangle, but versions of the golden triangle. I think in a lot of my work, um, and the way they interact, kind of like gods and goddesses, or I mean, I loved Botticelli and Rubens, and I mean, as a kid and as a teenager, I spent a lot of time looking at the old masters, and so I think that reads even in the work today. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think all you've done really is it's kind of like you've just done a remix of some classics in some ways.
Mhm.
It's like you've just taken these influences. You say that you say your dad had these photos, these paintings, and your mum was
Right.
interested in textiles, and you've gone and made a Venn diagram out of those two things, and then span it off in your own direction.
That's right. I'm the only child, so I needed to please my parents. I gave them a little bit of both, what they were interested in.
Hmm. Do you remember when, like, so if you're like your meanderings, you're kind of like just doing figures and stuff. Can you remember when that started to be like, you were like, oh, actually, there's a proper idea here, like you say, with these kind of fictionalized versions and these modern gods and, domestic situations being elevated and stuff. Can you remember how that kind of crept in?
I think intrinsically with the material, I started moving away from printed materials and just plain fabrics or printed fabrics, and got into the vintage fabrics. And my mom again was a big help, because she loved going to antique stores and tag sales and getting these old pieces, and they all had this some moment of incredible beauty, like some anonymous person at some point had spent hours, either crocheting the edges or doing a little bit of cross stitch in each corner, or something. Even baby quilts, even things that are very specific for, as a gift, most likely just for someone, had been discarded in a way, and or had gone out of fashion, like a doily or something. And there was so much beauty and craftsmanship in these pieces, but they were like, just at a garage sale or something. So
Mm.
I started thinking about connecting the concepts with the materials, and connecting, even further, like besides sort of the cute, kind of shock value of doing like small provocative figures, jumping around, printed fabrics. I wanted to go in deeper, and connect the ideas of history and something being discarded and not respected, and then breathe new life of it into it and give it, elevate it into like a something where someone in the contemporary art world would look at it and respect it. And I just, the idea of just connecting the materials to the concepts made a lot of sense for me with this kind of work.
So did the materials come first, or would you have an idea and then you'd find materials to suit, or a bit of both?
I guess a bit of both. A bit of both. Some of them are on like table linens, like tablecloths or bed covers and things that have this incredible like intimate history. You know, somebody slept on it, somebody ate on it, somebody, who knows what, you know, what the fabrics have this their own history. And so I felt like continuing on that history, but with a contemporary, with, through the eyes of a contemporary person. It just all connected so beautifully. It made a lot of sense. And when I started doing more of that, it really spoke to a lot of people.
It kind of reminds me of, like, I was thinking about illustrated books, you know, and how these people back in the day would spend their time writing these books out, but give them the opportunity to do a massive capital letter A or something, and they go absolutely gangbusters at it because it's an opportunity to really flourish. And you'd hear of them sometimes just drawing figures in the corner of pages and stuff like that because they're a little bit bored of just writing out another version of the Bible. And it's that same thing, isn't it? It's like this kind of unseen, spectacular craft.
That's lovely.
And I guess then you just take that and you go, right, we're going to just shine a spotlight on that a little bit, use it as part of the storytelling.
Yeah. And it's amazing how this has just blown up. I mean, I feel like, you know, I've been doing this for like 30 years or something, but now I keep reading about the trends of fiber art, and it seems like every gallery has, you know, one or two people working in some kind of fiber-based material, sculpturally, 2D, you know, everything you can think of. You go on Instagram or you know, I mean, you know better than me. Like it's, there's so many, and people working with these different kinds of materials in different ways and similar ways. And I mean, I remember back in like so long ago, I would say, I guess the late 90s, I was talking to a gallery, and he said something like, you know, this is really great, but I just signed with one other person that is working with thread. So, you know, I'm sure you have no problem. Thanks. And it's funny, it would be like, you know, talking to a curator and being like, you know, I have a painter already, so no more paintings. Or you know,
Yeah.
one fiber person, that, you know, that's enough. It was so segregated, like that material. A gallery could only show one artist doing that, and you would never say that.
Because no, but it's still, I think it still feels like that sometimes, though. You know, it's still bonkers, isn't it? It's still bonkers that you can choose a certain medium, and because of the prehistory of it, people can just be like, yeah, but is it really art, though?
Although I don't think. I mean, it's an interesting. It's an interesting topic because I don't see that it's really segregated anymore so much. I mean, I think it seems like I see it everywhere. Not as common as, say, painting um, or photography, even that also had its troubles with, is it really art, kind of thing.
I think there's never been a better time. Don't get me wrong. You know, we can spin back, and even I can spin back quite happily 15 years and be like, no one would ever think about this. And it would be the only way you would see a textile art show is if it was like really rock and roll, edgy. Look at all these penises in textiles or whatever, you know, because they were just really going for the shock jock of it all. Whereas now it's taken a bit more gracefully and a bit more seriously and, you know, a bit more legitimately. But the curious thing is, I still think I can still have conversations with people who are needlework artists now who are still waiting for that validation that you were talking about 25 years ago.
Even though you could go online and see like hundreds and hundreds of wonderful
I think so, because I think the problem is that it's brilliant. It's brilliant that Instagram can show us all this stuff, and it does make you feel like there's a real diaspora
Yeah.
Drinking game, everybody said the word diaspora. But at the same time, when you translate that into the real world, I think that's where it becomes quite difficult. Now, you said that you live right across the road from, like, what did you say? Museum of Modern Art?
For now, we were living
Yeah.
across the street from the Metropolitan Museum of Art.
And I mean, how much textiles is in there?
Well, it's a huge museum, so I'm not an aficionado on all their departments, but they do have, and it's more of a traditional museum. They don't. I mean, they do have a contemporary section.
So what's interesting, like we have the Royal Academy shows over here, and I know quite a few people that put textile pieces into those, and they don't necessarily get in. And a lot of that is whoever's curating those shows, but there's still that cutoff, you know. And this is all I'm saying is that, like, there's never been a better time for textiles, but we're still like fighting a bit of a battle to gain that legitimacy. You know, I had a friend who entered, I think it was submissions for the National Portrait Gallery, and the National Portrait Gallery were like, yeah, no, it has to be oil, like it has to be paint. You know, it can't be textiles. It doesn't count.
Yeah, I think that's in the guidelines for them. But so that's just, isn't it in the guidelines, like only painting?
I think so, yeah. And you just think, you know, so that's, I guess that's still like legacy, isn't it? It's institutional textilism. Just make that phrase up. That could be a thing. I think sometimes that it's almost like you need like there to be an Uber of art galleries, some way that just frees off all the shackles. It's difficult because of the physical mechanics of art galleries and stuff. But, you know, some people who just go, I don't really care what I show. I just show what I like, and it doesn't matter what the format is. Whereas because of the industry behind it, there's still just a lot of people who'll be like, I'd accept a massive neon sign quicker than I'd accept an art quilt.
I don't know. It's a quandary. There's no one path to understanding why certain works are shown or other works are not shown. I have so many friends that are not represented that are so good, such quality work, craftsmanship and concept, which is, I think, important. I see a lot of just concept and not great craftsmanship, for example, out there, or it's hard to wrap your brain around, you know, how you get your work out there and how you get represented, and even if you're represented, who sells and what sells, and it's a curious thing.
Do you find that weighs on you much, or do you try and not think about it too much and just carry on making art?
It's kind of a mix. I mean, I'm always making art, but at the same time, you know, it does get frustrating because, you know, you're making something that you want people to see, you want to have that interaction, and you see other things out there, and you want to be a part of it, you know, but you have to remember it. You've had your day, like everyone. Hopefully everyone has had their. I think the career is not linear, so it's up and down and up and down, and so hopefully you achieve something that makes you feel like you've been seen, and it doesn't happen consistently, but it happens.
Yeah, I suppose you need to know that you're not just doing it for nothing, don't you? You need those little rewards at some point, be it 10,000 likes on Instagram or £10,000 in your back pocket.
I don't know. I feel like I need less validation as I get older in general, almost in everything, in every topic. But certainly with art, it's nice. Certainly it's lovely, but I need less validation in general.
So nice, isn't it? It's just such a relief when you look back on like your 20s and you think, God, I needed everybody to really like me back then. And now you just go, I just don't care.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a weight that you can, you know, let go of as you age.
Thanks for joining me on another Needle Exchange. I hope you enjoyed the show. I'd love to hear from you, so feel free to email hello@needle.exchange, that's NEEDL.exchange, with any thoughts, comments or feedback. And if you want to keep up with all the news, sign up to the NeedleXChange mailing list at bit.ly, bit.ly/NeedleXChange. See you next time.